In the middle of the night, I got a call from my father-in-law. He stated my mother-in-law was in a vehicle accident and begged me to rush to the hospital with money. I instantly turned to Lisa and stated Mom was in a wreck and we don't have any money at home. We'll have to spend your bride price cash first. The instant my wife heard it, she was furious. She shot back, "No way. It's your mom who was wounded, so why should you touch my bride price? Can't you borrow from your relatives?" I glanced at her in disbelief, not expecting her to say such a thing. I answered, "It's a matter of life and death, and you're worried about your bride price?" She rolled her eyes and snapped, "Then give me an IOU, and no matter how much you use, you'll pay it all back to me later." I was stunned. Chapter 1. The bride price was initially paid by my family, and now it's going to save her own mother. Why should I have to pay her back? My wife looked very serious. She ignored the fact that every second counted, went into the study, grabbed some paper and a pen, and said in earnest, "Write it down. Say that today you're borrowing my money to pay for her treatment and pledge to reimburse it." I said, helplessly, "She's our mom. Can't you just stop this nonsense?" My wife cut me off, agitated. "Can you stop making a scene? The bride price from your family is my financial stability. Now something happens and you quickly want to delve into my security money. What if you never pay me back? If you really cared about me, you'd borrow from someone else instead of touching my bride price right from the start." I couldn't understand it at all, so I tried to reason with her again. "You're not even willing to save Mom? How can you be so heartless?" She gave me a wounded look and tears started spilling down her cheeks. She wept. "So you're starting with moral blackmail now, huh? From the outset, you equated a life and death crisis to my bride price, pressing me to select one or the other. You have so many relatives you could borrow from. Or you could simply give me an IOU." I was shaking with anger. "Why should I write you an IOU?" My wife grew more agitated. "Then have Dad write one. He's a mature man. Why should a daughter-in-law's bride price pay for his wife's treatment?" I forced myself to stay calm and said, "Fine. You write one first. Once we arrive to the hospital, I'll have Dad sign and stamp it." Only then did my wife nod in satisfaction. She started composing the IOU, but at that moment, my father-in-law abruptly called again. I believed he was pressing us to get to the hospital as quickly as possible. When I responded, my father-in-law sounded agitated. "Where's the money? Transfer a few $1,000 to me right now." I turned around to my wife. "Time is critical. Can you make the transfer first? I recall you saved quite a bit of money, didn't you?" She got upset at once. "No way, I won't transfer. Assent until the IOU is signed. What if he doesn't pay me back later?" My father-in-law went silent on the other end. He questioned, shocked. "Is that my daughter talking? Pay you back for what? What's she talking about?" I answered honestly, "Dad, don't be furious. She's issuing an IOU because she's scared you won't pay her back afterward." He couldn't believe it. "She's still writing an IOU at a time like this?" I told him that we'd transfer the money once he signed the IOU. All of a sudden, my father-in-law lost it. His voice shook and grew harsh. He exclaimed, "She's a heartless beast." He was so loud that my wife heard him on my end. She stopped writing, walked over, snatched my phone, and yelled, "Who are you calling a beast? You shameless old idiot. You can't even afford your wife's medical cost, and now you're cursing me? I'm not lending you anything." With that, she smashed my phone onto the ground. I instantly grabbed it up only to realize the screen was damaged and had gone dark. It wouldn't turn on no matter what I tried. My wife was shaking all over with wrath. She spat, "That old man dared to curse at me, screeching like a eunuch. How disgusting." Just then, her own phone rang. On the screen, the caller ID displayed Dad, precisely like how I classified her father in my own phone. My wife took up the phone and hissed, "Calling again to insult me, huh?" She rejected the call, then said coldly to me, "He was the first to throw obscenities. I'm not lending anything now. Go beg your family for money. Don't touch my wedding price." In despair, I said, "How can you refuse to help? As a child, witnessing your parent in grave peril and not helping them, that's almost illegal." She snapped, "Don't attempt to intimidate me with the law. We recently had a wedding feast. We haven't even registered our marriage certificate yet. The law doesn't apply to me. And let me tell you this, if you push me too far, I'll break up with you right now, and I'm not returning the bride price either. I gasped. You know this is your own mother we're talking about, not mine. She stopped in surprise, then delivered a frigid laugh. You're trying to trick me, so I'll pay, aren't you? If it were truly my mom, would my dad label me a beast? I had no time to deal with her nonsense. I knew her bank card's password, so I snatched it and rushed for the door. But my wife panicked. She tried to get the card back. When I wouldn't let go, she leaned down and buried her fangs into my arm. The agony was severe, so I had to let go of the card. She bit down so hard that she left a bloody mark on my arm. Holding my wound, I saw her escape to a corner, holding the bank card, eyes overflowing with malice. Noticing my rage, she tightened her teeth. You're actually trying to forcefully grab my bride price just to save your own mother, aren't you? If it were genuinely my mother in peril, would you be this desperate? I said, if you don't believe me, phone your parents and ask them yourself. She scoffed. Do you think I'm stupid? You want me to contact them so you can guilt trip? Me together? You are not permitted to tell them about this. With that, she suddenly grabbed a pair of scissors and held them against the bank card. I cried furiously, no. Chapter 2. My wife watched me carefully. I stated hurriedly, listen, that bank card was opened just to hold your bride price. We put it up together at the bank, and I haven't even linked it to mobile banking. Yet, if you chop it up, we won't be able to utilize the money tonight. She glared at me coldly. Maybe I should cut it up. When that old idiot labeled me a heartless beast, he should have realized I'm not someone who just stands by and lets others trash me. I broke down. That was your dad. Lisa had a frantic expression on her face and said, he's your dad, not mine. He's just a sleazy old man who can't even pay his wife's medical costs and then blows out on me. And you're both plotting together to scam me out of my bride price. She really meant it. Right in front of my eyes, she slashed the bank card in half. Watching our final hope become shattered, I sank into the couch, tired of all vitality. It's over, I mumbled in a stupor. Everything's over. She offered a contemptuous snort. Go to the hospital and see your mom by yourself. I'm not going. Besides, what are you so scared about? By law, physicians have to attempt to rescue a patient. I answered helplessly. Physicians will keep her alive, certainly, but only with the most basic treatment. Without money, we can't pick which drugs or equipment patients utilize, nor can we pay for continuous therapy. She may be spared today, only to suffer handicap or worse in a few days. My wife shrugged unconcerned. Then why are you still standing here? Go borrow money from your own relatives. Oh, right. I'm not registering our marriage with you anymore. I froze. She wasn't going to acquire our marriage license, yet she asked me to borrow money to rescue her own mother. I said, why? Won't you get the certificate? She replied, who knows how much it'll cost to save that elderly lady? It may be a bottomless pit. Debts fall on both spouses once we're formally married, and I don't aim to destroy my entire life, merely to meet her obligations. I'd rather cut my losses and not marry you at all. I was devastated. I don't get it. Spending money to rescue your mother would destroy your entire life? Lisa approached me and said earnestly, listen, Mom's already up in years. Wouldn't it be better if she simply passed peacefully? Stunned, I could only stare. Lisa, do you even comprehend what you're saying? She pleaded. Don't blame me for being heartless, let's do the math. If a vehicle accident is catastrophic enough to necessitate urgent care, it might cost hundreds of thousands. How are we expected to finance kids in the future if we squander our funds on that elderly woman's treatment? You're not even thinking about buying a home in a respectable school district. I hesitated. What drove me over the line was the next thing she said. Let's be honest. If the medical expenses go beyond $300,000, I'm divorcing you. In fact, because we haven't registered yet, we can just cut it off. Right now. Her words hit me like a punch. Spending $300,000 to rescue my mother-in-law just to wind up divorced? I'd be left with a large debt and no family. What would I have left then? Just then, her phone buzzed again. Apparently, my father-in-law couldn't contact her by phoning, so he started sending messages. He was outraged, and his remarks were dirty. He raged. You ungrateful wretch. You just got $300,000 from the bride price, yet you refuse to save your mom. You're worse than a pig or a dog. An awful beast. And I'm meant to sign an IOU for my own wife's treatment? Transfer the money right now, or I promise I'll come after you. Lisa let out a sigh. She didn't open the texts. Instead, she showed me the alerts on her screen and added, "See how he's insulting me? Threatening me." I said, "Dad's simply out of his mind with worry." She shook her head. "Stop calling him Dad. Starting right now, he's simply a filthy old man to me." I realized I couldn't talk to her anymore. My father-in-law was visibly desperate. This was a matter of life and death, so I grabbed up her phone and requested, "Can I call our relatives and friends to borrow some money?" She replied, "Go ahead." But as I mentioned, we're not officially married yet, so this wouldn't be a shared marital debt. If it's too huge a loan, none of us should have to pull the other down. We'll simply separate up peacefully. I nodded. Scrolling through her contacts, I spotted her best friend's phone. Just as I was ready to ring, Lisa recognized the name in the phone's contact list. She took the phone away and yelled, "Who are you calling for money? Your friend." I said. Her cheeks became crimson with wrath. "Are you out of your mind? Why would you ask my friend for money? Don't you have your own relatives or buddies?" I told her honestly, "You destroyed my phone, so I can't call any of my folks. I just have access to your contacts." She fumed, "You truly are a piece of trash." I stared at her in disbelief. Here was someone refusing to help her own mother, yet she had the guts to call me garbage. She kept shouting, "Your mom's about to die and you want to drag my friends into it for money. It's your family's crisis. Don't throw it on other people." I tried to reason with her. "Stop being ridiculous. Your mom is waiting for you to help save her life." Lisa sneered, "Wow, you've really got it all figured out, don't you?" I couldn't fathom what she meant by that. Chapter 3. My wife said, "I see exactly what you're doing. You know I won't hand out my bride price, therefore you want me to borrow money from my families and friends. Then when you refuse to pay them back, I'd have no choice but to use my bride price to satisfy the loan. Isn't that right?" I replied, "Isn't it obvious? Why should I pay your family back? You told yourself the bridal price is your security fund. If there was ever a moment to utilize it, it's now." She yelled, "Stop spewing rubbish. That money is my security. It belongs to me alone." In her fury, she suddenly opened WeChat and sent a voice message to her family group chat. Because she was so upset, her voice was trembling as she shouted, "Listen up, everyone. If my husband tries to borrow money from any of you for that old woman's operation, do not lend him a single dime. I'm telling you right now, I won't pay it back. I don't care whether that old hag lives or dies." Messages popped up in the group almost immediately. Someone who looked to be her uncle typed in shock, "Are you even human?" My wife snapped back, "Uncle, you don't know the complete story, so don't leap to judgments. Do you know he tried to use my bride price to pay for medical bills?" Her uncle was even more stunned. "Then use the bride price. This is a question of life and death. How can you be concerned about the money?" She was furious. "Why should I spend my bride price? Show you some respect by calling you uncle, but if not for that, you're nobody. This is my money. When did you get to select how it's used?" Since she was the group admin, she immediately kicked her uncle out of the group. Right immediately, my father-in-law sent another SMS. It flashed over the top of the phone's screen. "I'm coming to your new place to get the money, you heartless beast. I swear I'd rather murder you myself." Lisa was in the middle of booting people from the group, and when she saw that message, she was livid. She swiped at the notification without really viewing the text and contacted the police straight away. While she was on the phone, she turned to me and said, "You see what he wrote, right? He threatened to murder me. I'm reporting that old man to the police right now." Panicking, I pleaded, "Lisa, don't contact the police. Dad's just out of his mind with concern. Mom's still in the hospital. If you get him arrested, who's going to take care of her?" She gave a frosty laugh. "Don't bother pleading for him. You're disgusting. I can see exactly what type of person you are. You'd rather see your wife abused than speak up for her. Marrying you was the worst mistake of my life." Outraged, I asked, "When did I ever mistreat you?" She growled, "First you attempted to take my bride price. Then you wanted me to borrow money from my family for the debt. Now I'm being threatened and you don't want me to contact the police. Haven't I gone through enough?" Her voice rose and spit flew onto my face. At that time, the call connected. She instantly said, "Hello, I'd like to report a threat. Someone says he's going to my home to murder me. Please send cops immediately away." She gave them our address, and the operator told her, "Cops have been dispatched. Lock your doors and remain safe till they arrive." My wife hung up and sneered, "I'm not locking anything. I want him to pay." Shocked, I asked, "What are you intending to do?" She answered, "Didn't you see how he just threatened me? I'm going to let that old man try to strike me, and when the cops turn up, I'll obtain a medical evaluation and send him straight to prison." I stared in disbelief. "You're out of your mind. You truly want to send our dad to jail." Chapter 4. She was much more furious now, shrieking at me, "You're the one who's crazy. Didn't I tell you to stop calling him our dad? He is not my father. He's been cursing me and you still won't take my side. I regret marrying you. I'll never register our marriage and I'm not returning the bride fee. If you don't like it, go sue me in court." I stared at this hysterical woman, unable to believe she could behave like this. And yet, for some reason, I felt a strange sort of relief. Relief that it wasn't my own mother lying in that hospital bed tonight. I could only think how much worse things could be if it were. I clenched my teeth and answered, "Fine. First thing tomorrow morning, I'm filing with the court to freeze that bride price until you pay it back." Lisa gave a cold laugh. "That's hilarious. Sure, go ahead and freeze it. Meanwhile, your darling old grandmother is resting there in the hospital. Your entire family's sole hope is locked up in a frozen account. I can't wait to watch it happen." I couldn't understand what she found so funny, but after tonight, I'd seen her real colors. I was resolved not to marry such a person, nor would I handle her obligations. Fortunately, I knew a lawyer from previously. When we'd been planning for marriage, Lisa compelled me to sign a prenuptial agreement and even had a lawyer serve as a third party. According to the arrangement, once we were formally married, all of her assets would stay hers alone, while half of my property would go to her. I grabbed her phone and contacted our lawyer. I mentioned that he already had our information and urged him to draft an urgent motion to the court asking an immediate property freeze. I wanted to send it first thing in the morning so we could freeze the cash as early as possible. Seeing that I was serious, Lisa sat to the side and jeered, "Yeah, go on and freeze it. It's still better than letting you use it to save your mother." Absolutely priceless. I snapped, "It's your mother who's dying." From my perspective, because she'd given up on becoming legally married to me, her mother was no longer my responsibility either. My wife went ballistic. She pointed at my face and shouted, "Watch your mouth. Your own family member is dying. Don't you go cursing my mother." She still couldn't grasp that her own mother was the one in the accident. I responded plainly, "It's your mom who's on her deathbed." Lisa yelled, "I'll rip that filthy mouth of yours right off." In a frenzy, she sprang at me. I was ready to tell her that it actually was her mother in the accident when she grabbed my face and started tugging. She even tried to push her phone into my mouth, saying between tight teeth, "So you want to spew garbage about other people dying? My mom never done anything to you." I couldn't speak because my mouth was full of phone, and she managed to smack me several times in the face. Never in my life have my own parents put a hand on me. Fury swelled inside me, especially after she'd made it apparent she had no intention of repaying my bride price. I lost control. I grabbed her by the hair and landed 2 powerful blows on her face. She lurched back a few paces, bewildered, almost losing her footing. Staring in surprise, she remarked, "You actually hit me." I responded, "You attacked me first. Why can't I hit back?" She screeched, "I'll fight you to the death. Go on, smack me harder. Cover me with bruises so I can send you straight to prison." She flung herself at me, sobbing hysterically, even though she clearly wasn't a match for me physically. Every time she tried to claw my face with her nails, I merely pushed her off and she'd slide backward, landing on the floor. Realizing she couldn't beat me, she started shouting foul words at me, louder and more savage by the second. "I hope your mother dies. I hope she's the one laying on the operating table tonight, dying in the worst, most torturous way. It's her own responsibility for raising such a useless man like you. Serves you right if she dies. I responded, icily, it's your mother who's truly dying. She shrieked, don't you dare curse my mom. Chapter 5. She erupted into another frenzy and rushed at me again, shouting at the top of her lungs. In her desperation, she even seized the fruit knife off the coffee table and lunged at me with it. I struck her across the face, leaving her temporarily shocked. Then I grabbed her wrist and gave it a strong twist. The contrast in strength was too considerable. She yelled out in agony and dropped the knife. Realizing she couldn't hit me, she started yelling curses. Your mother's dead. She's going to die tonight. Tomorrow I'm opening champagne to celebrate. I'd had enough of her insanity. I grabbed her by the head and forced her face under the tap in the kitchen sink, turning on the water to wash out that disgusting mouth of hers. She couldn't breathe, her head crushed under the flowing water, choking and screaming. In a frightening voice, I questioned, have you insulted me enough? Do you know that the selfish one here is you? Even if it actually were my mother? In that hospital bed, true couples support each other's parents. She spat out a mouthful of water and glared at me. You're the selfish one. If my mom were in the hospital right now, I'd never demand money from you and I wouldn't bring your family down. I frowned. Do you honestly expect me to believe that? She grew more agitated. True spouses don't burden each other. You're a selfish monster. You just care about snatching my money. If today my mom had been in the accident, I would have thought of you. But you? You haven't thought about me at all. I nodded. Fine. Make sure you remember that. Just then, I noticed a familiar car pulling into the complex right underneath our window. It was my father-in-law's automobile. At the sight of it, Lisa quickly exclaimed, You're finished! My dad's here! You're totally done for! I glanced down and confirmed that it really was my father-in-law stepping out of the car. He looked up at us and Lisa opened the window. Gritting his teeth, he hissed, Come down here so we can talk. Lisa, though, wanted him to come upstairs and give me a lesson. She cried back, You come up here. There was no question in my father-in-law's mind that this was an act of provocation. His expression hardened with rage and he rushed into the building in a hurry. Lisa gave out a sigh of relief, clearly bolstered by her father's arrival. She threw me aside and yelled through her sobs. My dad must have seen what happened in the group chat, so he rushed over here because he was worried about me. You're done for. He's going to beat you to death. I hadn't expected him to show up so quickly. My mother-in-law was still in the hospital in critical condition. For him to depart the operation room and hurry here meant he was beyond enraged. Maybe that was for the best. At least I wouldn't need to cope with all of this by myself. Lisa, still ignorant to the turmoil she'd brought on herself, pushed me aside and headed for the door. She was cunning enough not to let me off lightly. On her way out, she hurled or broke whatever she could get her hands on. Vases on the coffee table, the shoe cabinet near the entrance, until the whole area looked like a war zone. She was plainly trying to portray a scene of serious domestic abuse. She even disheveled her own hair to seem like she'd been beaten to a pulp. Then she turned back to me and stated coldly, You're done for. You never should have messed with a girl who had a dad. I'll make you pay. She opened the door and actually knelt down in the hallway. I could hear the elevator coming up. My father-in-law was on his way. As the elevator neared our floor, she started screaming loud enough for anybody within to hear. When the doors opened, he walked out, visage gloomy as thunder. Lisa recognized him and promptly shouted out, Dad, he hit me! All because I wouldn't hand over my bride price to rescue that dead old hag. That one sentence, calling my mother-in-law a dead old hag, was all it took for my father-in-law's hands to curl into fists. Chapter 6. My wife continued on weeping. I want a divorce. I refuse to give him what he wants. I'd rather have the money frozen by the court than let him use it to pay for the medical costs. I want that old hag to stay on her hospital bed feeling the anguish before she dies. My father-in-law was still thinking clearly enough to know that saving a life came first. Ignoring his daughter's concerns, he held down his rage and turned to me. Where's the bank card with the bride price? I shrugged and answered honestly, I attempted to take it and rushed to the hospital, but your daughter stopped me. She split the card in two, and since it wasn't linked to mobile banking, there's no way to utilize that money tonight. Hearing this, my father-in-law strode forward with increasing speed. My wife pointed at me, tears still flowing down her face, and said, "I managed to snatch the card from him and cut it up." She wanted to keep blaming me, but my father-in-law couldn't hold it longer. He lifted his foot and kicked her straight in her tear-stained face. Caught off guard, never in her wildest thoughts did she believe her own father would strike her. She went face first on the ground with a heavy thud. She whirled back, gripping her face, gazing at him in amazement and dread. Why, would you hit me?" she stammered. He yelled, "Your mother is lying in the operating room between life and death waiting on money to save her, and here you are acting like a callous traitor. Tell me, do you deserve this thrashing or not?" Panicking, she cried out, "But it's his mom, not mine. Why should I care?" I said coldly, "I've told you numerous times, it's your mother who was in the accident." She froze. Her voice trembled as she turned back to her dad. "You mean my mom was in the crash? My actual mom is on the operation table? Wait." She hurriedly grabbed her phone and opened up the message notifications. Before she'd just seen the sender's name in the contact display. But if she pressed the text itself, the phone number would emerge. She questioned in a confused voice, "Was this you texting me all along?" Her father raised his hand and slapped her hard across the face again. "If it wasn't me, who else would it be? A ghost." Covering her face, she turned to me and sobbed. "The calls at the beginning, it was my dad too." I answered, "It was always him. I told you over and over." My father-in-law cut me off, still fuming, and said to my wife, "I begged you for money. Why didn't you pass it over? I'm here ready to sign any IOU you want. Where's the money now?" She wailed in desperation, "I don't have it. I chopped up the card." "What should we do, Dad? Is the bank open now?" He was livid. He threw her to the ground and raised his hands in wrath, yelling, "It's the middle of the night. What bank is open at this hour?" She ignored the blows, bursting into tears. "I didn't know it was my real mom. If I'd known, I would have sent the money immediately away. Maybe since things were so hectic, none of us realized the elevator had gone back down once already." Suddenly, it dinged again and opened. 2 police officers emerged, and the instant they spotted my father-in-law beating my wife, they held him down. Startled by the police's appearance, he yelled, "Who called the cops?" I answered, "Your daughter did." Instantly, his face went pale as ash. My wife broke down. "Dad, I didn't call them for you. I thought the person threatening me was my father-in-law." Then she turned and shot me a venomous glare. Through clenched teeth, she shouted, "You scum! I'm not going to dispute with you now. I'm headed to the hospital. You'd best call every family and friend you have and borrow as much as you can. Tomorrow, take the bride price out of the bank too." I asked, "Why?" She paused, then blurted, "My mom needs that money. Why else?" I shrugged. "We've already decided not to get married. Why should I spend my bride price to save your mom? Weren't you the one who stated if it was your mom on the operating table, you'd never pull me down?" She stared at me, stunned. It was actually something she'd stated herself, but it appeared she'd forgotten it all too fast. She said in despair, "What do you want then? Do you want me to confess I was wrong? Fine, I'll apologize." "Okay," I laughed, to think she thinks her apologies was that precious. I shook my head. "I used to think marriage was about sticking together through thick and thin until you showed me how wrong I was. The instant a parent required aid, your initial inclination was to terminate all connections. You have no right to touch my bride price." Hysterical, my wife begged the officers to release her father and turned to him, sobbing, "Dad, please say anything. Mom's still depending on us to save her." But he stood there, face flushed and unable to say a word. He understood exactly what had happened here. Chapter 7. My father-in-law mumbled, "Did you or did you not tell him loud and clear that if it were his mother in trouble, you'd make him sign an IOU for the money?" My wife wept. "I know I was wrong. I'll change from now on. Dad, please say something." He gritted his teeth. "What can I possibly say? Anything we do or say right now would only embarrass us further." A deathly pallor settled over her face. I nodded. My father-in-law fully knew how important this was. Unfortunately, his family still had the misfortune of creating someone like her. He pulled his daughter aside and gave her a long look before plodding away, feeling dejected. Panicking, my wife yelled, "Dad, aren't you going to take the money?" "What about Mom?" He spat through clenched teeth. "I'll borrow from family and friends. If I have to, I'll mortgage my home. Don't call me Dad anymore. I never reared such a cruel beast." All at once, the mood grew unbearably tense. My wife stopped attempting to incriminate me in front of the police. Instead, she rushed to her feet and grasped my arm. "Give me the money, please. Just think of it as a loan. I swear I'll pay you back." "My mother's dying," I remarked coldly. "So my mother's life doesn't matter?" She fell apart. "You're a man. Can't you be magnanimous just this once?" I laughed. Weren't my actions at the start already generous enough? She stared at me in a daze, unable to find any words. In desperation, she went back inside and grabbed the bank card she'd ripped in two. She attempted to sew it back together, hoping she could at least swipe it at the hospital. But of course it was futile. In her savage wrath, she'd slashed straight through the chip. The only money she had left was the little quantity in her personal savings, maybe 20,000 yen overall. For an essential procedure, that was a drop in the ocean. So she went outside weeping. The hospital would handle the very least to keep her mother alive, but better equipment or medication and any longer-term treatment would cost real money. It was like someone with a terrible heart issue getting rushed to the hospital. They'd stabilize him, but there was no way the hospital itself would pay out of pocket for a costly artificial heart. With the property now in ruins, just the cops and I remained. I gave them a recap of everything that had transpired, and they were all very startled. One of the cops slapped me on the shoulder and sighed, telling me I deserved someone far better. After they went, I cleaned up the flat and contacted a locksmith. I had him change the locks straight away. I also grabbed all of my wife's stuff and dumped them outdoors. According to the prenup we'd signed, if we got officially married, half of my apartment would become hers. But since we never finished the marriage certificate, and she'd claimed she never would, she no longer had any right to step foot in this location. Sure enough, altering the locks was the proper call. Not long after I'd done cleaning, I heard a key fumbling in the lock. Soon my wife discovered she couldn't get in. She started hammering on the door saying, "Honey, I've already used up my savings. The doctor recently told us about the next round of treatment fees. Please assist me." I tried to withdraw the money without a bank card at the ATM, but it only let me take out 20,000. "I'm going insane," I said calmly. "You're truly something, you know that? After I informed you I wouldn't give you a nickel, you still went and tried to take out the 20,000. Don't you recall vowing that if it was your mother in the hospital, you'd never pull me down? Get ready to see me in court." She broke down sobbing. "I've got no other way. I can only swallow my pride and ask you, what would it take for you to forgive me?" I just sighed. She had brought this all on herself, especially by ripping up the bank card. Had she not done that, she may have gone to the hospital and paid the costs before the lawyer or the court could freeze the assets. Another alternative would have been to go to the bank tomorrow with the broken card and withdraw money at the counter. But it wouldn't matter. We live in a tiny county with few bank offices, and I've already told my mom. Outraged by what transpired, she'll be leading her band of senior buddies on a stakeout at every bank in town by morning. The instant my wife arrives there to withdraw funds, she'll realize exactly how successfully a group of old ladies can cause a ruckus, and how swiftly a bank may decide not to release any money. I snarled at the door. When you believed it was my mother in that hospital bed, you basically wanted her to die. That's the same as attempting to kill my mother with your bare hands. From this day on, we're finished. There's no turning back. She sobbed. "You're really going to forsake me? Sever all links between us? Is that what you've chosen?" Her wailing continued outside, but I couldn't be bothered to listen anymore. I put on my headphones, my pick. Right now, it's absolutely Master Yi. The opponent team chose 5 champions without any dependable crowd control. Perfect conditions for Yi to go wild. Chapter 8. I laid on the sofa with no one to bother me, blissfully gaming till 2 in the morning before eventually laying down my phone. It struck me how carefree my life used to be. Originally, I had taken some vacation time off for the wedding, and now these days were fully mine. Taking advantage of my time off, I remained up till 2 without feeling drowsy. Once I was convinced my wife wasn't outside the door, I ordered some late-night BBQ and took a drink from the fridge. Sitting at the table enjoying my dinner, I couldn't help recalling how tight money used to be while I was saving for the bride price. Yet here I was, shamelessly indulging myself to games and BBQ. It almost felt like fate had given me a second chance. Although I was pretty comfortable, my wife was having a dreadful day. She had booted her uncle out of the family conversation and then had to go begging him for money, all while news was circulating about how she'd refused to pay for her own mother's care. Everyone was calling her an ungrateful wretch, pouring all sorts of terrible comments on her. She attempted to explain herself, but it was meaningless. Once she recounted her side of the tale, folks only realized that assuming it was my mother, who required urgent medical bills, she'd clutched to her bride price like a lifeline. Her reputation was damaged beyond repair. By the next day, my lawyer had helped me file a case with the court. Given the exigency, the court promptly froze the bank account. To rescue my mother-in-law, my father-in-law had no alternative but to sell his house. He succeeded to procure her treatment in the end. The funny thing was that after my mother-in-law found out what her daughter had done, her blood pressure nearly shot through the sky. Furious, she booted her out of the hospital room, screaming she'd embarrassed the whole family. The court processes went smoothly, and the judge ordered that the bride money should be repaid in full. Judges are human after all. With a tale like this, my wife created a poor impression. By the time we met each other again in the courthouse, she appeared as though she'd aged a dozen years. After the court issued the ruling, she wailed and asked me, "Now nobody wants me anymore. Everyone looks down on me. Are you satisfied? I know you did this on purpose. You damaged me so that if I ever wanted to get back together, you could demand a free marriage with no bride price, right?" I stared at her, stunned. "Have you developed a tumor in your brain?